The 5th year of marital separation with Lucas, I suddenly met with an accident and died in a foreign land, leaving behind only my frail 4-year-old daughter. That night, my father made a call to Lucas. The voice on the other end was cold and impatient. "The child isn't mine. I've been separated from Tina for 5 years, which constitutes a de facto divorce. Even if she dies, don't come looking for me." My father patiently explained, "You're still Tina's legal husband. We need your signature to confirm her death certificate so the child can proceed with the adoption process. My father is getting old and no longer has the strength to raise my daughter for me, but I also knew that Lucas wouldn't want this child." On the other end of the line, anger turned to bitter laughter. "To avoid divorce, you'd even dare to fake your own death now. Then I hope she gets her wish soon." The call was abruptly ended. The child had nowhere to go. So my father could only take my daughter along with the death certificate and photos of the remains, traveling thousands of miles. They went to Lucas's company. On the night I died, Lucas made his last phone call to me. "For the past 5 years, our marriage has been unhappy, and we've been living apart, because I refused to divorce." Lucas argued with me endlessly over the phone many times. On the other end of the line, he was as furious as ever. "Tina, do you think hiding in another city can drag this out forever? I've been separated from you for 5 years, which is more than enough to qualify for divorce. I've argued with him for too many years." This time, I remained silent for a while. Through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling window, I looked at the woman sitting by the table near the window. "That's my client. I just helped her win a lawsuit involving severe domestic violence, sending her husband to prison." She was grateful yet awkward, inviting me here for a meal. A woman barely in her 30s, yet covered in scars and so thin her eyes were sunken. She cried and told me she was finally free. It suddenly occurred to me that I'm almost 30 this year. Lucas and I have been married for 5 years, and separated for 5 years as well. "Over there," Lucas's furious voice came through again. "I don't want to waste time in court for someone like you. Just sign the divorce papers, and we'll both save ourselves the trouble." I stood on the street corner on a summer evening. After a long silence, I finally replied, "Okay, I agree. It was probably an accident." But silence fell on the other end. After a long while, I finally heard his voice again, perhaps too overwhelmed with joy. The man's tone seemed a bit awkward. "You better mean what you say." I couldn't quite describe the feeling. After dinner, I picked up my daughter Alice from the nursery and, on the way, printed out a divorce agreement. Then, late at night, I waited at the bus stop to go to the hospital to visit my father. Behind me, a fruit knife suddenly pressed against my neck. A somewhat familiar yet sinister voice rang in my ears. "Lawyer Tina is so charitable. Can she save herself this time?" It was the brother of the man who had been imprisoned for domestic violence. I thought about resisting or calling for help, but my daughter was standing right beside me. Alice was terrified and opened her mouth to scream. The man growled a warning. "Make a sound, and you'll die right here." I didn't resist. Held hostage by the man, I was taken to a deserted alley, mouthing the words to Alice, "Don't be afraid. Call the police." Alice is only 4 years old, but she's the most obedient and sensible. I've walked this path with her countless times. The police station is less than 500 meters away. I told her to call the police. She truly believed the police could save me. But deep down, I knew I probably wouldn't make it. I've been a lawyer for nearly 10 years. Inside and outside the courtroom, I've seen countless wicked people who commit evil deeds. I can somewhat read expressions and discern a bit of what's in others' hearts. This man truly wants to kill me. He has a psychiatric history of over 5 years. I came across him when investigating that domestic violence case. A mentally ill person can evade punishment for murder. The last thing in my sight was Alice's petite figure, desperately running toward the end of the road. Several times, she fell but quickly got back up. She was a premature baby. In the past, even walking a few extra steps would leave her breathless. At this moment, in the deep night with the wind howling, she ran like an arrow released from its bow. She thought running fast enough could save her mother. Before that figure was about to disappear, I carefully engraved it into the depths of my eyes, hoping to remember it well one last time, so that in the next life, I could find my child again. The dark alley was completely deserted. The knife finally plunged into my neck without hesitation. The man laughed maniacally in my ear. "You didn't really think obeying would keep you alive, did you?" My brother cried in court, admitting his mistake and promising never to hit his wife again. "Yet you still didn't let him off." blood gushed out violently. All I could hear was the sharp ringing in my ears, my vision spun wildly. Everything a blur of crimson, the phone in my coat pocket suddenly rang, like the last piece of floating wood reaching out to me. As my consciousness rapidly faded, I instinctively and urgently reached for the phone. In my extremely dazed vision, I barely managed to make out Lucas's name before the phone was snatched away. The man with a ferocious expression seemed about to reject the call immediately, but for some unknown reason, a strange, malicious smile appeared on his face as he answered the call. He watched my desperate struggle with excitement, shamelessly announcing to the other end, "She's about to die by my hands, and she still thinks she can call for help." Blood quickly soaked through my clothes, the overwhelming stench of iron filling the air. The instinct for survival made me struggle to speak as my consciousness faded. "Lucas, save." The other end cut me off with utter disgust. The furious voice brutally snapped me back to reality. "Disgusting, don't call me that again, Tina. If you keep pretending to be pitiful, don't even think about delaying the divorce for one more day." In my dazed state, I finally managed to recall. It had been many years since I last called him Lucas. We haven't had a proper conversation in many years. Just like now, we live apart in different places. Even if he were truly willing to save me, it would be impossible now. Moreover, he wouldn't be willing. I wanted to speak again, to entrust the uncared-for Alice to him one last time, but I no longer had the strength to utter a single word. Only the gushing blood rapidly drained the warmth from my body. The man holding the knife even let out an unexpected laugh. "Are you her husband? She's about to die. Don't you really want to save her?" In my dazed consciousness, all I heard was a cold chuckle from the other side. "Then you'd better not hold back." How awful it sounds. No matter how strained our relationship is, we've been married for 7 years. The killer listened to Lucas's indifference, as if suddenly seized by immense excitement. The knife in their hand plunged deep into my heart. I was almost completely exhausted. My uncontrolled moans of pain now reduced to faint and hoarse sounds, on the other end of the phone. They must have heard it. The killer looked at my miserable state, his voice growing increasingly excited. "Did you hear that clearly? She's almost lost her voice to cry for help. How about this? If you're willing to come save her, let's talk. I might just consider sparing her life for now." Given his deranged state, he probably wasn't lying. If Lucas was willing, the killer might indeed wait for him to arrive. Looking forward to making Lucas, my husband, witness how miserably I die. I desperately wanted Lucas to agree. If only I could buy a little more time. Perhaps Alice would arrive with the police. Perhaps there's still a way out for me. Truth be told, I'm not really that fearless in the face of death. I still have my daughter, and my father. If given a choice, no one truly wishes for death. But with the excruciating pain racking my body, I couldn't make a single sound anymore. In my fading consciousness, there was only Lucas's voice, mocking and utterly cold. "If you're really going to kill someone, why waste so much breath?" Then, from the other end, came the sound of complete impatience as the call was abruptly hung up. The killer was furious and called again, but the other end no longer answered. The person before me was completely enraged, and the knife in their hand plunged wildly into my neck and heart like a madman. Their mouths spewed deranged roars. "Think I wouldn't dare. Think I wouldn't dare." I felt my body being torn open by countless wounds. The overwhelming scent of blood, like a flood, completely submerged me. At the very end, it seemed I heard Alice's voice, filled with terror and something like a plea. "Mom, Alice brought the police. Alice is here." With great effort, I opened my eyes, opened them, but Alice wasn't there. The body plunged into an endless abyss. The police arrived quickly. Less than 10 minutes after I took my last breath, the police car arrived. Alice was drenched in sweat from head to face, yet didn't shed a single tear. With a tense expression, she only told the police the direction in which I had been taken hostage. She earnestly and carefully described the appearance of the perpetrator. It wasn't until they finally found me that the child, her face already deathly pale, suddenly collapsed beside me. I had over 10 stab wounds all over my body, covered in blood from head to toe. Her mouth had also been crudely sewn shut by the deranged murderer with rough stitches, presenting a gruesome sight in death. Several police officers were so shocked they momentarily gasped, but Alice seemed oblivious, as she had done countless times before. She calmly and playfully reached out with her small hand to touch mine. "Mommy, Alice brought the police uncle here. Thank goodness, we found Mommy." Alice was a good girl and listened. Alice will always be a good girl and listen. She seemed unaware that I had died, or perhaps, she simply refused to acknowledge it. At this time as usual, I would reach out and pat her head, then open my palm, like performing a magic trick, and produce a piece of candy. But this time, I can no longer touch her head. My soul hovers in midair, trembling with grief and helplessness. Alice is only 4 years old. Lucas doesn't know she exists. And my father's condition has recently worsened. He's struggling himself, let alone having the energy to help me take care of the child. My Alice, what should we do? The police quickly pulled her away. A female officer sympathetically covered the child's eyes and gently comforted her. Sweetie, mommy is just sleeping. Auntie will take you to the car to rest first. Okay. Her eyes covered. Alice didn't protest. She just nodded obediently and said, okay, Auntie, please hurry and help me call mommy to the car too. Okay, mom will catch a cold sleeping outside. The policewoman could say no more and took the child into the police car, except for Alice, and my so-called husband Lucas. In the legal sense, the only family I have left is my father. My funeral arrangements need to be handled by family. That night, the police had no choice but to bring news of my death, along with photos of my body, and took Alice with them to the hospital to find my father. I desperately wanted to stop them, knowing my father wouldn't be able to bear it. His condition is critical now, barely clinging to life himself, but all I have left is my soul. Even if I chased after the police to the hospital, frantic and helpless, I couldn't stop what was happening. In the hospital room, Alice saw my dad and immediately complained to him, Grandpa, Mom fell asleep by the roadside again. She'll catch a cold. Please call her quickly. She's most afraid of you. Once before, I was working on a case late into the night, after picking up Alice from daycare. I collapsed by the roadside. When I'm busy with work, I often neglect my own health, but as soon as my dad calls me and threatens to leave the hospital to take care of me, I immediately obey, drop my work, and go to the hospital to stay with him, promising to take better care of myself next time. This time, Alice's consciousness seemed to be malfunctioning. She thought I had just passed out on the roadside like before. The police temporarily escorted Alice out of the hospital room. Another officer, with sorrow and helplessness, informed my father of my death. Then, at my father's insistence, they gave him photos of my remains. I heard the sharp alarm from the heart rate monitor connected to my father. His somewhat cloudy eyes stared into midair. He opened his mouth several times but couldn't make a sound, nor could he cry. Other than that, I turned my head away and hastily left the ward, not daring to see his reaction again. The police soon left. Probably out of consideration for my father's health condition, they didn't say much more, nor did they take him to handle my funeral arrangements. I followed Alice back to the ward and saw my father sitting on the hospital bed, staring blankly out the window. Alice ran over and grabbed his thin, four-attached hand with her small one. She gently patted him and asked, Grandpa, have you called Mom yet? My father didn't move, still staring blankly out the window with a lifeless expression. Until Alice exclaimed, Grandpa, your hand is bleeding. His overly tense and forceful hand had pushed the needle out of the blood vessel. Only then did my father suddenly snap back to reality. After a moment's hesitation, he reached out and pulled the needle from the back of his hand. Then, with a pale face, he patted Alice's head. It's okay. Grandpa doesn't hurt. The medicine is finished. No more injections. As he spoke, he picked up the coat by the bed. With some effort and trembling hands, he pulled out a bank card from his pocket and tucked it into Alice's clothes pocket. In that instant, I had an extremely bad premonition. That bank card contained all my father's savings over the years, along with my meager salary. Leaning on the edge of the bed, he got up shakily, took Alice's hand, and walked outside. The voice was as gentle as ever, yet seemed to have lost its soul. Then Grandpa will go look for Mom. Alice, why don't you stay with the nurse for a while? Okay. Alice nodded immediately. Okay, Mom always listens to Grandpa the most. Near midnight, my father left the hospital alone. He went to the roadside, seemingly to hail a taxi, yet he stood there, motionless. His clouded eyes gazed at the endless stream of cars on the street. Lost in a daze, he appeared so calm. Yet his lips were nearly bluish-gray, and his hands hanging at his sides in the dim light, trembling violently despite his desperate efforts to restrain them, ultimately betrayed his utter bewilderment. I died, in this world, over countless days and nights of the past decade. the only one who would discipline and restrain him in the hardships of life. His daughter, who struggled in the mire with him and relied on each other, had died. The wind ruffled his sideburns, where new strands of white hair seemed to emerge. After a long while, I heard him murmur softly, "Little one, why, aren't you coming home from work yet?" No one would answer him anymore, only the night as still as water, and the summer breeze silently swirling fallen leaves. He gazed blankly into the air, murmuring again as if in a trance, "It seems like he was trying to scare me. If you don't come back soon, I'll sneak out of the hospital again." In the past, he couldn't bear the medical expenses and had secretly checked himself out of the hospital several times, trying to leave without telling me. I dragged him back to the hospital and threatened him, saying that if he didn't stay obediently next time, I'd really give him a good beating. At that moment, he guiltily lowered his eyes but couldn't help saying, "Your work is hard, Dad's health is fine, save on medical expenses. And maybe you can rest for an extra day," he said. "So many people say you're a good lawyer. Dad just hopes you won't have to work so hard. All these years, it's just been the two of us depending on each other." The long stream of cars departs, only for new ones to arrive. The night grows deeper and deeper, until another taxi passed by in front of him. Too long had passed, and he seemed to finally snap out of it. He reached out and hailed the car, then he got in and sat in the back seat. The car drove away, through the window. He watched the rapidly disappearing layers of tree shadows. After a long while, it seemed he finally remembered something. Softly, as if suddenly realizing, he let out a sigh. "Oh, she's not coming back. My Tina is gone." All that remained in my nose was an endless sourness. The taxi kept moving forward through the deep night. I didn't know where my dad was actually heading, until the taxi stopped near the mental hospital. He got out of the car, touched his pocket again, and walked straight toward the hospital grounds. I saw it, the faintly visible handle of a fruit knife protruding from his pocket. Only then did I suddenly realize what he was about to do. He probably knew who the killer was. He knew the perpetrator wouldn't face legal consequences due to mental illness. I heard his voice, soft and gentle. "If the law can't help Tina, Dad can." It was like many years ago when he picked me up by the roadside and gently asked, "No one wants to take you in, then? Would you like to come home with me?" I threw myself at him, screaming in terror, my heart filled with fear. But I'm dead now, and he can't see me. Only trembling yet unwavering steps, continuously approaching the hospital grounds, until he reached the outer wall of the hospital, seemingly intent on climbing over to get inside. Behind him, a young, uneasy voice suddenly called out, "Grandpa." My father's hand, holding the knife, froze abruptly. He turned around and, under the dim moonlight, saw Alice standing not far away. The slender figure rushed toward him and hugged him tightly. "I want to find Mom together with Grandpa. I asked the nurse to bring me here." My father's hands, covered in blue and purple bruises from years of needle pricks, trembled slightly. The knife in his hand silently slipped into the grass. After a long pause, he spoke in a shaky voice. "Grandpa will send Alice to the welfare home for a while, okay? Mom called Grandpa and said she went to a faraway place to handle a lawsuit and won't be back for a while. Grandpa is sick and can't take good care of Alice." The child hugged him tightly, her small body trembling slightly. After a long pause, she just nodded obediently and said, "Alice will be good and wait for Mom to come back." My father's expression was vacant, his face deathly pale. He collapsed to the ground, clutching Alice tightly. His voice cracked with a hoarse sob. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Grandpa was wrong." Alice reached out and touched his face. "Grandpa isn't sad. Mom is busy with work, and Grandpa is sick. Alice will be good. Alice can live anywhere." My father took Alice to the police station overnight to inquire about the process of sending Alice to an orphanage. He was in a hurry to send Alice away, probably not because of his own health issues, but rather to be free of worries before helping me seek revenge. I was burning with anxiety but could do nothing except follow them to the police station. The officers made some inquiries, then turned to my dad and said, "Is this child Ms. Tina and her husband's?" My father struggled to respond. "My daughter has no husband. She got divorced 5 years ago." The police officer looked puzzled and said, "But according to the records we've checked, Ms. Tina isn't divorced yet. If the child is to be sent to an orphanage, we'll likely need Ms. Tina's husband to confirm her death information, also, confirm that her husband is not the child's father. Orphanages only accept children who are parentless or whose parents are unable to raise them. My father stood frozen in place, unable to believe what he was hearing. 5 years ago, I was framed and had a huge fight with Lucas. He called me despicable, convinced I had schemed against him, unwilling to bear such a stain on my reputation. I was deeply resentful and stubbornly refused to divorce. Unable to endure it any longer, I took my father and left to live and work in another city. I lied to my dad, saying that Lucas and I had a falling out and were already divorced. Not long after I left, I found out I was pregnant. Despite eating many blood-nourishing foods, I still couldn't have an abortion due to anemia, so even to this day, my dad doesn't know that Lucas and I are still married. I don't know if Alice is really Lucas's child. The police spoke again. We didn't find Miss Tina's phone at the crime scene. If you have contact information for Miss Tina's husband, you can reach out to him. If the child is her husband's, there's no need to send her to an orphanage. The father can take custody. No need. My dad suddenly spoke urgently, interrupting the police officer. After a long pause, he continued absent-mindedly, the child isn't his, so he doesn't need to support it. Lucas and I have hardly gotten along since we got married over 5 years ago. My dad knew, so he probably also knew that whether Alice was Lucas's child or not, Lucas wouldn't accept her. The policeman sighed. Even if the child is sent to an orphanage, the death certificate for Miss Tina still needs to be signed and confirmed by her husband. My father remained silent for a long time. I knew he didn't want to contact that person. 5 years ago, Lucas and I had a huge fight. Lucas looked at me with utter disgust and demanded a divorce, saying even the sight of me made him sick. My father witnessed it all with his own eyes and ears, but now that I'm gone, Alice is only 4. She must be taken care of properly. My father glanced sideways, looking toward the window where Alice was being comforted by a female police officer while eating candy. The officer followed his gaze and sighed. The child must be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is why she believes her mother is still unable to continue. The officer fell silent. My father's aged hand clenched tightly into his palm. After a long while, he finally took out his phone and dialed Lucas's number. It was already past midnight, but the call connected quickly, perhaps due to busy official duties. The other end had not yet gone to bed. My father had just revealed his identity and mentioned my 4-year-old daughter, Alice, before he could even announce my death. The other end had already grown extremely impatient and cut him off. Child, whose child? Tina and I have been separated for years. It's practically a divorce. Even if she's dead, don't come to me. My father was momentarily speechless. Perhaps he thought they already knew about my passing. His face trembled, and it took him a while before he could speak again with difficulty. You are still Tina's legal husband. Please sign her death certificate to confirm, so the child can go through the adoption process. In those brief sentences, his voice broke several times from trembling too violently. His eyes were already nearly bloodshot, yet the response he received was one of bitter hatred and mocking laughter, as if hearing a joke. To avoid divorce, you'd even dare to fake your own death now. My father couldn't utter another word. The cold laughter on the other end grew even more pronounced. Then I should wish her an early fulfillment of her wish. My father's hand gripping the phone suddenly tightened. The only sound that came through was the beep-beep of the disconnected call. My father's hand trembled as he held the phone, murmuring softly, Why aren't we divorced yet? That kind of man. He refused to answer my father's phone calls any longer. Instead, he angrily sent me a message. Stop playing these disgusting tricks, Tina. No matter how many schemes you devise this time, don't even think about dragging out the divorce any longer. I've had enough. I suddenly felt somewhat relieved that my phone had already fallen into the hands of that murderer. Otherwise, if my dad saw such a message, he would probably be even more heartbroken. I've never been good at winning people's affection. Even the husband I worked so hard to get has despised me for so many years. Unable to contact Lucas again, my father, despite his poor health, managed to arrange my funeral affairs and still booked a train ticket to H City. He took Alice and traveled a long distance to the city where Lucas lived. His health was poor, and he was unfamiliar with H City. Arriving in H City by train in the early morning, he held Alice's hand and struggled to ask around for directions. It wasn't until nearly noon that we finally found Lucas's company. Yet in that huge company, He wasn't even allowed into the lobby before being stopped by security at the entrance. Under the scorching sun, Alice's little face turned pale from exhaustion, but she just tightly held onto my father's sleeve, never uttering a word. My father carefully handed the document folder he had been clutching to the security guard at the door. "Please, I need your help. My daughter, she's gone. She was Mr. Lucas's wife. I have urgent business and need to speak with Mr. Lucas, for so many years." Almost no one outside knew that Lucas was married. The security guard simply thought he was a madman or a fraud. The man refused to take the document bag, his expression full of disgust as he said, "Mr. Lucas and Miss Sarah are getting married soon. Your daughter is his wife. Ha, if you want to lie and deceive, at least do your research first." No matter how much my father pleaded and explained, he couldn't get in. He had no choice but to first place Alice in a shady spot not far away. I continued waiting under the scorching sun outside the gate. Only then did I remember that he had rushed here overnight yesterday. In my haste to see Lucas, I only bought breakfast for Alice, not even having a sip of water myself. The sun gradually rose high in the sky, then slowly began its descent. My father's body gradually became unsteady, stumbling several times. But as the whole day passed, until evening, Lucas still hadn't shown up. My father could barely hold on and couldn't wait any longer. He could only speak with a trembling voice, pleading with the security guard once more, "Please, just let me in for a moment, or perhaps, you could just pass a message to Mr. Lucas for me. I really can't get in touch with him anymore." Ever since last night, after he called Lucas, his number had been blocked by Lucas. The security guard sneered, "At your age, you should stop dreaming about randomly claiming family ties. Let me be honest with you, even if you wait here until tomorrow, you might not get to see Mr. Lucas. He might not even leave through the main entrance. There are plenty of ways to exit this company." My father's face stiffened, and soon his expression became unbearably anxious. He probably just started to realize that Lucas might not necessarily leave through this main entrance. Just to find this company, my father had already spent a great deal of effort. If Lucas left the company, there were so many places he could go or stay. It would be like looking for a needle in a haystack for my dad to find him again. The security guard waved him away, saying, "If you've figured it out, then hurry up and leave." The sky gradually darkened, and more employees left work. Lucas should probably be leaving by now, but among the people coming and going, there was still no sign of him. My father's face turned pale as he shook his head helplessly. No, without finding him to sign, Alice can't be adopted. We have to settle Alice first, then we can help Tina. He was still thinking that once he had no more ties, he would go and avenge me. This fool. I trembled and sobbed, but there was nothing I could do. My father clenched his fist. Suddenly, trembling unsteadily, she stepped forward and, thud, knelt before the security guard. "Please, let me in. I must see Mr. Lucas." During the rush hour after work, a large number of employees were pouring out. Seeing my father suddenly kneel down, gasps and jeers erupted instantly. "Are you crazy? Why hasn't this guy left yet? Scammers these days have no bottom line. They don't even blink when kneeling. Disgusting. Call the police and have him arrested right now. What's the hurry? Wait until Mr. Lucas and Miss Sarah arrive, and he'll get what's coming to him." Alice, sitting not far away, rushed forward with reddened eyes. The child's figure was frail, but at this moment, they bristled like a hedgehog raising its spines, gazing at my father, who was kneeling on the ground, surrounded and mocked by the crowd. She shielded my father, trying her best to look fierce as she glared at the crowd. "My grandpa is no liar. My grandpa and my mom are the best people in the world." A brief moment of shock and silence fell over the crowd. Soon after, the sneers and taunts started up again. "Bringing a child along just to deceive people. Thinking a kid will win sympathy. Wasn't it said that the girl is Mr. Lucas's wife? Next they'll probably fabricate that this child is Mr. Lucas's daughter, right? Tisk. How disgusting." The crowd of onlookers grew larger, their mocking laughter intensifying. My father knelt on the ground. In front of him stood Alice, her body trembling visibly yet her back straight with defiant pride. Amid the clamor and chaos, someone murmured in a low voice, "Mr. Lucas is here." The mocking voices quickly dissipated as the crowd turned their gaze toward the company's entrance. Following their line of sight, I saw a man in a tailored suit with a cold, composed expression striding out confidently. By his side was a young woman, her arm linked with his. It's Sarah, I know her, the one everyone says is about to marry Lucas, back when Lucas and I were separated, during our most intense fights, when he accused me of being calculating and underhanded. Sarah was already working under him as his secretary. Now, they've probably gotten together. Back then, I was furious because he had wronged me. I refused to divorce just to spite him and spent all these years separated from him. Looking back now, it really wasn't worth it. One can never predict whether tomorrow or an accident will come first. I thought I was wasting his 5 years, but in the end, it was my entire life that got wasted. Lucas looked indifferent, as if he didn't recognize my father. He took Sarah and walked straight out to the car parked outside the company. My dad coaxed Alice to stay put while he got up, exhausted yet anxious, and hurried after them. He stepped in front of Lucas, his face under the streetlight drenched in cold sweat, already as pale as paper, diagnosed with liver cirrhosis a year ago. Even walking a few extra steps was a struggle for him, yet she toiled through the entire night to come here, and then waited all day long, with a pained expression. He handed the document bag to Lucas. Mr. Lucas, Tina, she has passed away. I know, you wouldn't want the child. Please sign her death certificate, stating that Alice is not your child. I'll have the child go through the adoption process at the welfare institution. Lucas stared at my father for a long moment, as if finally recognizing him. The number of times he had seen my father could truly be counted on one hand. After hearing my father's words, his face darkened completely. Seething with anger, he snatched the document folder from my father's hand and flung it to the ground in fury. I've warned her many times not to play these disgusting tricks anymore. The bag was thrown onto the floor, the contents inside spilled out, scattering all over the floor. A photo of me covered in blood landed on top. In the darkness of the night, it was particularly striking and eerie. The woman clinging to Lucas's arms suddenly startled, letting out a scream, her face turning deathly pale. Lucas stared at the photo, his expression briefly frozen, a fleeting look of astonishment flashing in his eyes, but he quickly snapped out of it. He patted the woman's back reassuringly, his face twisted with utter disgust, his eyes now boiling with nothing but rage. How dare you Photoshop such an unlucky picture? Aren't you afraid that one day, you'll really end up hanging on the wall as a memorial photo? My father struggled to squat down and picked up the papers from the floor. When he stood up again and looked at Lucas, his eyes were already empty. Mr. Lucas, Tina, she's really gone. The child is innocent. If you don't want the child, just sign the papers so the child can be adopted by the welfare institution. Lucas was filled with utter hatred and still wanted to sneer something sarcastic. Behind him, a man's gentle and surprised voice suddenly rang out, "Uncle David." I looked in the direction of the voice and saw someone walking out of the company. It was Harry, my senior from law school, who later joined the same law firm as me after graduation. He used to take good care of me in the past. Later, I separated from Lucas and moved to another city. My interactions with Harry also became much less frequent. Lucas looked at the newcomer and sneered. "What orphanage? The child's biological father is right here, isn't he?" Harry heard these words. He looked at my pale-faced father, then turned his gaze to Alice, who was weakly crouching in the shadows not far away. A moment later, he asked with a surprised expression, "Is that Tina's daughter?" Lucas's eyes turned cold as he sneered. "Stop pretending, don't you recognize your own child?" Harry didn't want to engage with him further. Seeing my father's pale expression, I stepped forward to support him and said, "Uncle David, if you have any difficulties, come to my house to talk. I just took on a lawsuit related to the Liu family, so I came here for a visit." My father hesitated, unwilling to leave for the moment. Harry said gravely, "You might not know, Lucas and Tina's marriage has long been in name only. Don't expect this ungrateful wretch to help Tina." Lucas's face darkened. "Harry, no matter what happens between Tina and me, it's not your place as an outsider to comment." Harry ignored him. After comforting my father for a while, I helped him into the car. Then I walked a short distance away and carried Alice into the car as well. Lucas stared coldly at his retreating figure, his tone laced with sarcasm. "So eager for a family reunion. Harry, have you forgotten that my divorce with Tina hasn't been finalized yet?" Harry headed straight to the car, ready to leave. Lucas, receiving no response, momentarily showed a mix of anger and embarrassment. One is the young and accomplished Judge Harry, the other is the justice upholding great lawyer Tina. If I were to sue, exposing her affair with you during our marriage and the child you had together, then by some trending spots. Do you think you two can continue living this glamorous life? Harry pulled open the driver's side door. His hands suddenly froze mid-action as he glared furiously at Lucas across the car body. After a long silence, he finally spoke. You really don't deserve it. Lucas frowned in annoyance. What? Harry continued calmly. Someone like you truly doesn't deserve all that Tina sacrificed for you back then. With those words, he left without hesitation, getting into the car and driving away. The photo of me covered in blood on the street still lay on the ground. My father was probably too exhausted and his vision was blurry, so he accidentally left it behind and didn't pick it up. Lucas picked up the photo with a dark expression, likely growing angrier the more he looked at it. He simply took out his phone and snapped a picture of the photo. He sent it to my WeChat again, angrily demanding, having fun. Now when it comes to my matters, he always flies into a rage like this. But in truth, our relationship wasn't always this tense and confrontational from the start. I first met Lucas back in middle school. In my first year of junior high, my biological mother passed away after years of domestic violence, and her marriage led to depression and her jumping from a building. Amidst the indifferent gazes of everyone around me, on a certain late night, I killed my alcoholic biological father. Due to self-defense and being a minor, I was exempt from punishment, but from then on, I bore the ugly label of murderer. At school, I was ostracized and despised, bullied and beaten countless times by my biological father's relatives and friends, as well as by schoolyard thugs. But ever since I killed my biological father, my mind seems to have developed a problem. I could no longer learn to resist or fight back. Gradually, the bullying became more and more frequent. The first time I met Lucas was in my third year of junior high. On a late night when I was pushed into a ditch outside the school, it was the depths of winter that night, and H-City was covered in snow, with temperatures below freezing. I climbed out of the ditch in the twilight, and Lucas happened to pass by, handing me an outer coat. Beyond that, there was nothing more. That night I returned to the orphanage. In the dormitory, another girl deliberately splashed water on my bed. I confronted her about it, and she slapped me across the face. For the first time in years, I lost control and ended up in a physical fight with her. The orphanage director arrived with others to intervene. All the children in the dormitory pointed fingers at me, claiming I had wet the bed and started the fight for no reason. As always, the director believed the other children's words and scolded me angrily. In the end, somehow, the topic shifted to how I had mercilessly killed my own biological father. I ran away from the orphanage and dashed to that familiar stall by the street. The stall was run by a simple, honest middle-aged couple who operated a pancake stand. I often didn't have enough to eat and didn't have much money on hand. Sometimes after school, I would wait in the shadows nearby and only approach to buy when they were about to close up. The price would be much cheaper then. They would take the remaining bit of dough and spread it into a very large flatbread. Then they would wrap all the leftover ham and vegetables for me. That night, I had no money to buy bread, but after running away from the orphanage, I truly had nowhere else to go. As I was packing up, the couple seemed to notice my situation and gently asked, "No one to take you in, would you like to come home with us?" I went home with them. The orphanage, as if eager to get rid of a hot potato, quickly completed the adoption procedures for me. After barely settling down, I carefully washed that coat. In the coat pocket, I found a student ID card with the name Lucas written on it. I wanted to return the coat to him, but I never saw him again. Not long after that, my foster mother suddenly passed away from illness. My adoptive father moved back to his hometown thousands of miles away to bury and accompany his wife, taking me with him. I transferred schools and left H-City. The second time I saw Lucas was nearly a decade later. By then, I had graduated from university and, with my advisor's recommendation, started working at a reputable law firm in H-City. Having built some reputation in the industry, life was going smoothly. When winter came, I took on a case involving corporate contract disputes. Yet in the defendant column, I saw Lucas's name and photo. That face, I'd only seen it once. There's a mole on the left side of his neck, towards the back, on a night nearly 10 years ago, when he handed his coat to me. A car happened to pass by, and in the fleeting flash of its headlights, I saw it clearly. I only knew his name because of that student ID card. That single encounter, I remembered for nearly a decade. Perhaps because in my youth, the kindness I received was truly few and far between. Even just a coat handed to me, It happened only that once. That night, I sat by my bedroom window until dawn. At the break of dawn, I made my decision. Through the case files, I managed to contact Lucas. He started from scratch and achieved some success, yet he became the target of envy from his peers. The other party, being wealthier and more powerful than him, deliberately discussed cooperation with him and then rigged the contract. This led to the lawsuit accusing Lucas of breaching the contract. No law firm was willing to defend Lucas, all waiting to see the joke of an overambitious young man. I gave up the idea of negotiating with the plaintiff or defending them, and instead became Lucas's defense attorney. The case ultimately ended with the plaintiff's victory, but I did my best to reduce Lucas's compensation. His company suffered heavy losses, but at least it didn't go bankrupt. After that, Lucas and I became acquainted and gradually interacted more frequently. As for me, because I had offended the plaintiff's side, the law firm found an excuse to fire me. Rejected by several other law firms, my career began to struggle. My adoptive father was in poor health, and my life started to become extremely difficult and miserable. Lucas felt guilty and remorseful about it, trying every means to gather money to pay for my adoptive father's medical expenses. Whenever he had even a little time, he would come to take care of me and my adoptive father. Later, his company gradually improved, and as soon as he made some money, he almost gave it all to help me open a small law firm. After the economic crisis gradually subsided, I started taking on divorce cases frequently. Most of the time, I helped women trapped in troubled marriages. The pay wasn't much, but it brought peace of mind. Life gradually returned to normal, and then I married Lucas. On our wedding night, he held me with reddened eyes and said, "Tina, I owe you so much. In this lifetime, I will do everything I can to treat you well." But what I thought was the end of suffering turned out to be just another illusion. One late night, Lucas suddenly returned, furious, calling me disgusting and despicable. An important document he had left in the study ended up in the hands of the original plaintiff. They informed him that I had stolen it and delivered it to them. I tried to explain, but Lucas was furious. "Who else could have taken the things from my study besides you, Tina?" I was so angry that I couldn't speak for a long moment. His expression was both resentful and desolate. I should have known. How could anyone really do this over a so-called coat from a full 10 years ago? Willing to abandon your career prospects to help someone you've only met once. You've really gone through so much trouble, scheming at every step. Someone like me, is it really worth all this effort from you? After that, I had countless fierce arguments with him. He was so furious that he wanted to divorce me, even going so far as to make baseless accusations, suspecting that my relationship with my senior colleague Harry was improper, and because he didn't trust me and wronged me. I felt angry and resentful, stubbornly refusing to give him what he wanted. In the end, I simply took my adoptive father and moved away to live in another city. We remained separated but never divorced, dragging it out for all these years, until now. I suddenly passed away due to an accident. With the wife's death, the marital relationship is considered automatically dissolved. For him, it probably counts as finally getting what he wanted. I struggled to pull myself out of those far from pleasant memories. Outside the company in the night, after Lucas sent me a text message, he remained frozen there, staring intently at his phone screen, but in the chat interface, there would never be a reply from me again. In fact, ever since I passed away, Lucas was probably in a hurry to finalize the divorce with me and had contacted me several times. But whether it was calls or messages, without a doubt, I never responded again. At this moment, Lucas was staring intently at his phone, as if he wished he could reach through the screen to confront me face to face and have another fierce argument. He always seems to have a problem with me. Even Sarah, who was holding his arm, softly suggested they get in the car quickly because it was hot outside. But for a moment, it seemed like he didn't hear her. He gripped his phone tightly, whether it was my imagination or not. Even his knuckles seemed to turn white. Yet the message I sent still went unanswered. It wasn't like this before. Although we've been separated for 5 years and our relationship has always been strained, every time he contacted me to argue, I never pretended to be dead, because I believed I had nothing to feel guilty about towards him, so there was no need to avoid his calls out of guilt. But this time, or rather these past few days, I never responded to him again. Lucas stared at the phone screen for a long time. Perhaps he suddenly sensed something amiss. In the dim night, an unusual emotion flickered across his expression, restless and irritable, yet also seemingly somewhat uneasy. After a while, he sent me another message. You agreed to divorce verbally, but now you're nowhere to be found and not answering calls. If this continues, I'll have no choice but to file for divorce. Normally, no matter how busy I was, I would always call back immediately when he sent such a message. I'm a lawyer. And reputation is everything. If even I were to get involved in a lawsuit and become a defendant, it would obviously be extremely detrimental to my career. But this time, the message still sank like a stone. As if in defiance, Lucas refused to leave or put away his phone in the night. He stood there stubbornly, waiting for a long time, receiving no response. He turned to Sarah beside him and said, "You get in the car first." Sarah has always had a gentle temperament. Back when Lucas made her his secretary, aside from her competence, he also favored her personality. Watching Lucas stare intently at our chat interface, Sarah seemed somewhat aggrieved, but after a moment's hesitation, she still went to the car first. The office was empty, the bright lights extinguishing one by one. The man stood alone outside. In the desolate silence of the night, the dimness concealed his face, making it impossible to discern what he was truly thinking in that sudden moment. A sudden gust of wind from the street tousled his bangs, softening the sharp edges of his daytime demeanor. He kept staring at the screen for a while, then clicked into my moments again. I've been busy helping someone with a lawsuit recently and haven't updated any posts. The phone returned to the chat interface again. Then, as if momentarily distracted, his left hand loosened its grip. The photo he had picked up fell to the ground once again, covered in blood. My lifeless state on the photo was a gruesome sight of crimson horror. Lucas crouched down in a fluster to pick it up. When he held the photo again, suddenly, his hand trembled violently. Lucas has run his own company for many years and has achieved remarkable success by now. Actually, he can tell the difference with ordinary photoshopped pictures. There were colleagues in the past who tried to deceive him with fake photos, but he exposed them on the spot. It's just that he was too convinced I couldn't possibly be dead. But I too am flesh and blood, not an impenetrable fortress. All these years of arguing with him, countless times in the heat of the moment, I've said we'd never speak again until death. But in truth, no one can predict whether we'll even live long enough to see that day. Lucas stared at the bloody photo for a long time before letting out a light chuckle. It really does look alike. These crooked methods are getting more and more impressive, he scoffed dismissively, yet he seemed unaware of his gradually paling complexion, unaware of the hand holding the photo, which had begun to tremble uncontrollably. The night grew deeper. Not far away, the car door on the driver's side opened. The assistant, as if finally unable to wait any longer, approached and spoke cautiously. "Mr. Lucas, it's very late. Maybe you should go back first. You have a meeting tomorrow morning." Lucas stared at him blankly, somewhat dazed. After a long while, he twitched the corner of his mouth as if trying to smile, but couldn't quite manage it. His tone was laced with sarcasm. "Tina actually had her father lie to me, saying she, you see, that kind of person would stop at nothing to avoid divorce. She even dared to say that she..." That word, dead, no matter how many times he tried, he just couldn't bring himself to say it. The assistant wasn't clear about my situation and could only respond, "Miss Tina is so young, logically speaking, she wouldn't." What logic? Lucas suddenly became very agitated, cutting off the assistant. "Someone like her, so calculating, will live a long life," he said, directly opening his phone's call log and found my number. "I must make it clear to her today, playing all these disgusting tricks. So unwilling to get divorced, so unwilling. Couldn't you just come back and talk properly?" His voice grew fainter and fainter. In the silent night, it seemed to begin carrying a tremble. Finally, as if having made up his mind, he dialed my phone number. No one would answer. I knew that well. The killer took my phone. 9 times out of 10, it was casually discarded. After several attempts to call, as expected, no one answered. But Lucas seemed determined tonight, insisting on reaching me. His expression revealing an eerie obsession. The call was automatically disconnected, so he kept redialing, until, after who knows how many attempts, the call actually went through. I stared at the phone screen in disbelief, hearing that voice I'd grown all too familiar with, chilling, taunting, unrestrained. "If you're in a hurry to find someone, go burn some incense. Lawyer Tang has been dead for several days now. It was the one who killed me. I didn't expect it." Relying on his mental illness diagnosis, he actually dared to be this audacious, taking my phone and daring to answer my calls using your own voice. Lucas's expression froze for a moment. Perhaps he also remembered that the voice sounded somewhat familiar. He had heard it before. The night I was killed. He called me. The murderer answered the phone and even spoke to him. He has an excellent memory. Almost always. He never forgets what he sees or hears. Sure enough, he recognized it. His face stiffened as he let out a cold laugh. It's you again. How much did Tina pay you to keep up this act for so long? The vicious man on the other end was momentarily taken aback. Acting? What acting? Lucas suddenly seemed to lose all patience. When he spoke again, it was almost a growl. Tell Tina to get on the phone right now. Tell her that if she keeps playing these ghostly tricks to stall for time, I'll file for divorce immediately. And she can forget about being a lawyer. There was a brief silence on the other end. It seemed he finally realized. Lucas truly didn't know yet that I was dead. The man who had personally told the killer over the phone not to hold back. He actually seemed to really believe it. That night, the night I was killed, the murder he heard with his own ears was just a joke. He thought it was merely a joke. The man on the other end of the phone laughed with a mix of novelty and barely contained excitement. Ha ha ha. You actually thought she didn't die that night. She helped that bitch win the divorce case, getting my brother sentenced to 10 years. Once she fell into my hands, did you really think I'd let her live? Lucas lost control of his emotions and roared, "Shut up, I won't believe it." But it was as if the other side couldn't hear him, continuing with excitement and pride. Wasn't she the most eloquent lawyer? I didn't just kill her. I also sewed her mouth shut with a needle and thread. I heard that if you sew a dead person's mouth shut, they'll be born mute in their next life. Can a mute still become a lawyer? Ha 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 ha. The words from over there grew increasingly deranged. Emotions ran high as the mental illness flared up again. The photo still held in Lucas's hand clearly showed my corpse's mouth sewn shut with stitches. The scene was eerie and horrifying, just as Lucas had described. Utterly disgusting. When Lucas spoke again, his voice began to tremble violently. Madman. Madman, do you really think I'd believe that? Let me tell you, Before he could finish, the already delirious man on the other end hung up the phone. Silence once again engulfed the surroundings. Lucas, filled with rage, suddenly found himself with nowhere to vent. The phone call went through again, but no one answered on the other end. The assistant still stood by his side, noticing his state and asked with concern, "Mr. Lucas, are you all right?" Lucas's eyes gradually turned bloodshot. His eyes nearly bulged with fury as he raged. That lunatic, she thought she could fool me by getting others to lie for her. Before he could finish, he suddenly choked as if someone had seized his throat, breaking into violent retching. The photograph in his hand once again caught his gaze. He looked as if he had seen a ghost, utterly flustered, and threw the photo back onto the ground in a panic. Then, like a madman, he picked it up again and tore it to shreds. His voice was fragmented, filled with the same old disgust he always had for me. Instead of being a proper corporate legal counsel, you insist on handling those disgraceful, trouble-stirring divorce cases. She's offended enough people to die multiple times. Before the words could fully land, the speaker suddenly fell silent. Perhaps some particular word had made Lucas distinctly uncomfortable. His brow abruptly furrowed, and he didn't continue. Another bout of dry heaving, when he raised his eyes again. They were completely bloodshot. She wouldn't dare to die. Someone like her is meant to argue with me for a lifetime. The driver probably vaguely sensed something. A look of fear surfaced on his face, and he could no longer speak. Lucas crouched by the roadside for a long time, almost collapsing to the ground. He retched, then truly vomited. Perhaps it was the lighting, but the vomit seemed tinged with blood. He was so agitated, so indignant, so beside himself. Yet after a long while, slowly, he calmed down. When he stood up again, his face had turned deathly pale, yet she struggled to regain that calm and utterly indifferent demeanor. He walked slowly toward the car but tripped over a roadside bollard, nearly falling, staggering unsteadily, so unlike his usual composure, yet his expression remained cold and stern as ever, still pulling open the car door and sitting in the back seat. Sarah was still sitting beside him. She probably sensed something was wrong too. Her face filled with panic, not daring to breathe heavily. On the front of the passenger seat in the car, there was still a crystal ornament placed. I had bought and placed it there over 5 years ago. Perhaps Lucas was always too busy, which is why he hadn't thrown it away after all these years. At this moment, he stared fixedly at it and coldly ordered his assistant, take that ornament down and throw it out. The driver immediately complied, reaching out to take the figurine. Then pulling over to park, just as he was about to get out of the car, Lucas, who had been cold-faced and silent for a long time, suddenly spoke up again. Wait a moment, the assistant was puzzled, looking at him through the rearview mirror. Lucas had a strange expression on his face and remained silent for quite a while before speaking again. This stretch of road, no stopping, just leave it in the car for now, I'll throw it away later. The assistant instinctively wanted to explain something, but in the end, they gave up and followed the instruction, placing the ornament back in the passenger seat before continuing to drive away. I couldn't help but find it amusing, yet also felt a tinge of bitterness. Lucas had walked this stretch of road countless times. He knew better than anyone that this wasn't a no-parking zone, otherwise, his usually capable assistant wouldn't have chosen to park here. A most incredible conjecture flashed through my mind in an instant. He seemed, just a little, unsettled and flustered by the possibility that I might already be dead. The car came to a stop in the villa's front yard. As Lucas got out of the car and was about to enter with Sarah, suddenly, she called out to the assistant who was about to leave, check on Tina's current situation, and have someone keep an eye on her adoptive father. After speaking, he added, where the hell has Tina run off to now? Who am I supposed to divorce? The assistant nodded in agreement. As Lucas walked further inside, perhaps due to exhaustion, his figure staggered slightly. Sarah immediately linked arms with him and went in together. The last thing I heard was his voice, furious yet somewhat dazed, saying, always so terrible, with your mouth speaking of me, yet in your actions, you're so intimate with Sarah. Sarah had been living here with him, probably not just for a day or two. I recall how many years ago, for just an outer garment, I nearly gave up everything for him. Suddenly, I just felt ridiculous. I couldn't bear to look any longer, so I left that place and returned to my adoptive father's side. Alice and my adoptive father have already been taken home by my senior brother Harry. Harry now lives in a relatively remote area, in a two-bedroom apartment. Both he and I are ordinary people without much talent. After working so hard for so many years, I could only afford the down payment for this small home in the expensive city. In this world, there are those like Lucas, without family background or connections. Only a handful have managed to carve a bloody path through the mud and climb to their current status. My soul drifted into the apartment, just in time to see Harry sitting on the living room sofa. The man bent over in grief, covering his face with his palms. There was a muffled sob, barely suppressed yet still spilling out. Alice was sent to the bedroom to watch cartoons, leaving only my dad and Harry in the living room. Harry's voice was filled with anguish. How could it? How could it? Just last weekend, she called me, cheering about winning another divorce case. She said her birth mother in the afterlife might be proud of her. My father's pale face trembled. She chose this path because of that unresolved matter from her youth. I've actually thought before, perhaps, this day would come. My father's voice gradually trembled until it became inaudible, but I knew, I couldn't stop her. When she was young, she couldn't save her birth mother. Later, as she grew up, she wanted to save countless others like her mother. I suddenly felt sad too, turning my head aside, my eyes stung with tears. Ever since I can remember, my birth mother suffered from domestic violence year after year. She tried to resist, but it only brought her more brutal beatings. Later, she sought help from the neighborhood committee, reported to the police, and filed for divorce. The neighborhood committee and the police came to mediate several times, and in severe cases, my biological father was detained for a few days. As for the divorce, the relevant authorities said the marital relationship had not broken down. No one is perfect, and my biological father would surely realize his mistakes. It hadn't reached the point of granting a divorce. For over a decade, life went on like this, until my first year of junior high, when my mother, suffering from the misery of her marriage, fell into depression and leaped from a high building, becoming a vegetable. My biological father refused to take on the responsibility of support and filed for divorce. This time, the court agreed. My wife became a vegetable, making it impossible for us to live together normally, so divorce is legally permissible. That night, my dad was out drinking and bragging, making outrageous claims. Whether to divorce or not, isn't that still up to us men? If a woman becomes useless, we can just dump her if we say so. He came back after drinking and started packing to run away. I grabbed his arm, demanding the alimony ordered by the court. Enraged, he seized my hair, hurling abuse and beating me mercilessly. In the chaos, I grabbed a fruit knife and stabbed it into his temple. That remains the most unbearable scene in my memory to this day. Not long after that, my mother, who had become a vegetable, also passed away. In her lifetime, she struggled to attain freedom and liberation, yet ultimately met a bleak death. I pulled my thoughts back from the depths of agony. Seeing Harry, after a long while, I gradually managed to calm down. He spoke through his pain. "Uncle David, from now on, let me take care of Alice. I'll treat her as my own daughter. Is that okay?" My father's aged face trembled as he urgently refused. "This is absolutely not acceptable. All these years, Tina has had almost no other friend but you. You helped her so much back then. Helped me so much. How could we possibly repay kindness with ingratitude, Alice?" "I'll send her to the welfare institution," Harry said solemnly. "I can confirm that Alice is indeed Lucas's daughter. Lucas remains Tina's legal husband, without definitive paternity test results proving otherwise. Even if he denies that Alice is his child, the orphanage would never be able to take her in." My father didn't quite understand these things. The hope of sending Alice to an orphanage was shattered. He also couldn't possibly feel at ease sending the child to Lucas, who harbored extreme hatred toward me. Even if that person was truly Alice's biological father, my father was momentarily at a loss, looking at Harry with an expression bordering on despair. Harry tried his best to soften his voice and said, "Although my conditions are modest, I can still guarantee Alice's basic needs for food, clothing, and daily necessities. But I've worked in H City for many years, and it's difficult for me to start from scratch in another city, if you and Alice don't mind. After taking care of Tina's affairs, would you like to stay and live with me?" My father's face was twisted in agony, but no matter how overwhelming the guilt, in the end, there was simply no other choice. That night, he handed over both Alice and the bank card containing all their savings to Harry. He said he wanted to return to his hometown to accompany his deceased wife and handle my funeral arrangements, so he wouldn't stay in H City anymore. After entrusting everything, my father glanced sideways with a guilty expression, looking toward the bedroom where Alice was staying, but suddenly, he noticed that the bedroom door, which had been closed, was now slightly ajar. Alice stood quietly by the doorway. The face that was once the most obedient now bore unmistakable terror. Her eyes were red-rimmed, brimming with unshed tears. Her little mouth trembled uncontrollably, like a frightened rabbit. She probably couldn't resist eavesdropping, wanting to know where I had gone and when, exactly, I would return. But what she heard was my father saying he would leave her alone here. She was only 4 years old. It was impossible not to be afraid, yet her tiny hand just silently clutched the corner of her clothes, tight and wordless. She didn't cry, nor did she move, even when my dad suddenly looked over. She instinctively panicked and wanted to retreat to her room and close the door. Pretending she hadn't heard anything, she was timid and too well-behaved, just like when Harry brought her and my dad over. My dad was distraught and absent-minded. Harry asked if she had eaten, while her stomach secretly growled several times, yet she only dared to nod cautiously and say, "I've eaten." Through the air, I tried to gently pat her head. I want to hold her once more, to tell her not to be afraid, but in the end, I can do nothing anymore. That night, my father sat by Alice's bedside and stayed with her the whole night. Just before Alice fell asleep, he asked her in a trembling voice, "Alice, would you like to stay here from now on?" Alice's small hand, hanging under the blanket, suddenly clenched the fabric tightly. After a long while, she nodded very, very lightly. Alice will be good and listen, won't go anywhere, and wait for Grandpa to bring Mommy back." My father abruptly turned his head away, gazing out into the endless darkness beyond the window. He wasn't blind to the fear and terror in Alice's eyes. In the past, he had always doted on Alice the most, terrified of her suffering even the slightest grievance. Now, he simply had no other choice. After Alice fell asleep, my father stayed awake all night. She carefully went through the backpack and clothes she had brought, organizing them over and over again. In the latter half of the night, the child sleeping quietly in bed suddenly began murmuring intermittently. A sticky layer of sweat covered the forehead. "Mom, Alice brought the police officer here." Mom, Alice, is it because I wasn't fast enough?" She just couldn't accept reality, so she imagined countless times that she had bravely saved her mother. The backpack in my dad's hands suddenly fell to the ground. Flustered, he crouched down to pick it up. On that long summer night, large beads of cold sweat silently dripped from his forehead. His eyes were already bloodshot from exhaustion. The next morning, he still left the bedroom before Alice woke up. As he stepped out of the bedroom door, Alice, who seemed to be sleeping soundly in bed, opened her eyes. The child got out of bed quietly and followed behind my dad, until my dad walked out of the front door. Alice stood inside, watching him leave without following further. Her eyes were red, her little face trembling slightly. She seemed to be crying, but was trying hard not to make a sound. From childhood, she had always been taken care of by me and my dad. It was impossible for her to truly not be afraid, left alone here. But I probably also knew that if my dad did this, he must have had no other choice. As my dad walked out the front door and was about to enter the elevator, he paused briefly outside the open elevator doors. Alice was behind him. He must have known, yet after a moment, he still stepped into the elevator and left. The elevator doors closed, his aged hand covering his face as he choked back sobs. I heard his trembling, helpless voice. I'm sorry, I should have helped you raise Alice, but I couldn't do it, letting that person roam free. My soul hovers in midair, weeping helplessly, screaming in an attempt to stop it. He was always like this before, always this way. He couldn't bear to see me suffer, couldn't bear to see me wronged. If I worked too hard, he would disobey me, insisting on leaving the hospital, refusing to let me pay any more medical bills. I used to stop him and scold him. He would be reluctant but eventually give in, obediently staying in the hospital. But now, no matter what he does, I can no longer stop him. My dad bought a train ticket overnight, not returning to our hometown, but heading back to N City. That's where I was killed. As he boarded the train, I saw a familiar yet distraught figure following behind him. Passing through the ticket checkpoint after showing the ticket, it was Lucas. At some point, he had started following my father. I don't know what he wants to do. Perhaps it's really as he said. He's afraid I'll hide again. He wants to follow my dad, find me sooner, and divorce me. He followed my dad all the way, got off the train, and then took a taxi to tail my dad's cab. The taxi stopped outside a street food stall. At an outdoor dining table, Bob was sitting there drinking and bragging. After killing me, although Bob was exempt from punishment due to mental illness, he was placed under the control of a psychiatric hospital, and now, somehow, he had managed to escape from there. My father came straight here, having naturally managed to track him down. In no hurry to approach, my father crouched in a shadowy spot across the street from the food stall. Compared to the days before, when he had been utterly devastated and broken upon hearing of my death, now, he appeared remarkably calm. Without the slightest urgency, silently waiting, only a pair of somewhat aged and clouded eyes remained, fixed intently on the figure across from him, drunk, grinning wildly, like a hawk, locking onto its prey. I couldn't touch him, couldn't stop him. All I could do was stay close by his side, deluding myself into thinking I could still protect him. Just a few days, yet he looked so much older. His eyes held nothing but emptiness and desolation, but I truly only wish for him and Alice to live on well, even if I die unjustly, even if that person remains at large. In comparison, it really doesn't matter, but he can't hear it anymore. He'll never hear my voice again. No one can stop him now. I know. Bob stayed there for a long time. He seemed to relish the thrill of killing and then indulging in unrestrained pleasure. It wasn't until after 1 a.m. that he finally staggered to his feet, reeking of alcohol. He stumbled away from the food stall. My father immediately stood up and followed at a distance, neither too close nor too far. In the depths of the night, not a trace of expression remained on his face. The path grew increasingly remote, heading back toward the psychiatric hospital. A little past 1 in the morning, the streets were almost completely deserted, but my dad still didn't speed up until he followed into a secluded alleyway. The blade of the fruit knife gleamed with a sharp, cold light under the moonlight. Getting closer, Bob finally heard the commotion. Drunk, he staggered and turned around unsteadily, shouting, Who's there? Dare to follow me, looking for death? I've killed before." Before he could finish his words, my dad closed the distance in a few steps, without the slightest hesitation, and that fruit knife was already plunged deep into Bob's heart. I screamed in terror, but no sound escaped my lips. My father's aged hand trembled tightly around the knife. His eyes were bloodshot as he muttered, "Tina, Daddy will make him pay with his life for you." Bob dodged in panic, but because he had drunk too much, His body wasn't responding well, and he ultimately failed to dodge in time. Although the knife didn't deliver a fatal blow, he still suffered a severe stab wound. Blood gushed out as his expression twisted in agony. Hearing my dad's words, he let out a sinister laugh again. "So you're the good father of lawyer Tina, perfect timing. I'll just send you father and daughter to reunite. Wait till my brother hears about this. He'll be even more thrilled." He lunged forward, trying to snatch the knife from my dad. My dad sidestepped, and the man with a fierce expression fell face first onto the ground. Without a word, my dad just kept stabbing the knife, hard, into Bob's neck and temple, over and over. He aimed for every fatal spot. Looking at Bob as if he were a pile of rotten meat, dead set on taking his life. I had never seen him like this before. He was always gentle, timid, and submissive. For so many years, it had always been this way. Without exception, my death seemed to have taken away, along with me, the rational and gentle soul he once had. The person struggling on the ground to get up finally lost the strength to move. Blood flowed onto the ground, spreading into an ever-widening crimson pool. Bob's vulgar taunts and insults grew fainter and fainter. My father stared fixedly at that face, now covered in cold sweat and slowly turning deathly pale, raising the knife again, preparing to deliver the final blow. In the dim light, the motionless figure standing not far away seemed to suddenly snap back to reality. That person rushed over and grabbed my father's hand before he could strike again. I heard it, Lucas's voice. The voice was as rough as coarse sandpaper. Hoarse with grief to the point of being nearly inaudible. "You lied to me, didn't you?" My father was suddenly held back by someone, his eyes bloodshot, pushing and shoving like a madman against the hand restraining him. He roared uncontrollably, "Get away, get away. He must die. He must pay with his life for my Tina." Lucas, pale-faced, shook his head. "Impossible. She's just doing this to delay the divorce." Bob, lying on the ground and barely breathing, seemed to react to some word he heard. His bloodied face suddenly showed his eyes struggling to open, staring at Lucas. His eyes brimmed with intense excitement and madness. So it's you, the one who told me not to hold back, the beloved husband of the great lawyer Tang. It's you, ha ha ha." Lucas's eyes turned bloodshot. "Shut up, I won't believe it." Blood continuously gushed from Bob's mouth, yet he seemed to suddenly forget the pain, forget the fear of impending death, as if witnessing the most interesting, the most exhilarating scene. He coughed, gasped for breath, then burst into laughter with a strange tone. "You don't seem all that happy. What's wrong? You're the one who said I was talking too much nonsense on the phone and told me to hurry up." I really did soften my heart. I was planning to spare that woman, waiting for you to come save her. But you didn't want to, did you? It seems like you, more than anyone, were afraid of her staying alive. Ha 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 ha. My father seemed to hear nothing at all. All he cared about was desperately trying to push Lucas away, then kill Bob. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't push it open, until Lucas suddenly lost control of his emotions. It was clearly him who had just stopped my dad. Yet now, his face was almost twisted with rage. He snatched the knife from my father's hand and lunged at Bob. Bob's face turned deathly pale, but his laughter grew even more maniacal. "Oh, I forgot. You thought we were acting back then. Ha 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 ha. She actually fantasized that you would save her. You have no idea how she felt when she heard you say, 'Don't hold back at all.' Hearing you scold me for talking too much, hearing you hang up the phone abruptly, she had that look in her eyes, that kind of, tsk. I almost felt sorry for her watching that." Beads of sweat the size of peas rolled down Lucas's forehead, one after another, blurring his vision. His thin lips trembled, and rough, labored gasps of, "Ha, ha," escaped his throat. The knife thrust viciously toward Bob, but with his vision blurred and strength failing, he failed to strike his target several times. His voice trembled with rage, then turned almost panicked, incoherent. Shut up, no, no." Bob was already barely breathing, with more air going out than coming in, yet he still continued to grin savagely, his face twisted with ferocity. "She's dead. She's finally dead. Ha 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 ha. That disgusting woman who sent my brother to prison in court. Thank you so much for making me show no mercy. Ha 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 ha." Lucas's face gradually drained of all color. He seemed to have lost his soul, his eyes like deep, ancient wells, staring blankly, lifelessly, at the scene before him. Only his hands moved, like those of a walking corpse. One hand held a knife, the other still gripping my father's hand. No matter how my father roared in pain and unwillingness, his aged face as if torn apart. Lucas did not let go. From Lucas's mouth, words still spilled incoherently, as if talking to himself. Impossible, impossible. But he knew, he could no longer refuse to believe. Everything before my eyes is not an act. Bob, covered in blood, was on the verge of death. Not a single word he said could be false anymore. If it weren't for Lucas rushing forward to stop my father from delivering the final stab. The man lying on the ground at this moment is already a corpse. And my father has become a murderer, with no way out. Lucas knows best. In this world, apart from Alice, my adoptive father is my only family. My adoptive father and I have relied on each other for too many years. If I were still alive, my adoptive father would never have abandoned me to seek death on his own. There's only one possibility. I am dead, just like the day I was dying. As the killer personally told Lucas in our last phone call, just as he was outside the company, he called my phone. Only for Bob to answer. Once again, Bob told him without any concealment. The truth had long been laid bare before him. I was dead. I wasn't acting, nor was I hiding. He, Lucas, should have been the first person in this world, besides Bob, to know about my death. He should have known long ago. At that time, I was struggling on the verge of death. The murderer taunted him over the phone, asking, "Aren't you really going to save your wife?" What was he saying at that time? He said, "Then you must not show any mercy." My father struggled desperately to break free from that hand, his eyes wide with fury, determined to end Bob's life, emotionally shattered. In the end, he knelt directly before Lucas. "Mr. Lucas, please. I beg you, let me kill this beast. Let my Tina rest in peace, my Tina. My Tina, she was a good girl, she never wronged you, she's already dead, already dead." He was in agony, begging. For the first time in all these days since my passing, despair brought tears to his eyes. Lucas stared blankly at everything before him, like a puppet frozen in place. My father, overwhelmed by emotion and physically exhausted, soon fell unconscious, his already severely ill body giving way. The ambulance arrived and took my father and the dying Bob to the hospital. Lucas, distraught, followed them to the hospital. He forced himself to stay strong and testified to the police. He said he witnessed with his own eyes that Bob, drunk and mentally unstable, had held a knife to my father, who was just passing by. For no reason, my father fought back in self-defense and managed to grab the knife, injuring Bob in the struggle. Lying in the hospital bed, Bob refused to accept the truth. As soon as he regained consciousness, he roared that my father had stalked him with a knife and nearly killed him, but he had a psychiatric diagnosis. Not long before, he had killed me, using mental instability as his defense. The police were fully aware of this. No one believed his words, and he was out of life-threatening danger. The police eventually closed the case based solely on the testimony of the eyewitness, Lucas. When leaving the hospital, the police regretfully told Lucas, "So you were Ms. Tina's husband. You should have come to the southern city earlier. If you had, perhaps you could have seen her one last time. Now, all that remains of me is a handful of ashes, buried by my father." A police officer nearby whispered a reminder. "They've been separated for 5 years. There's no love left." Lucas stood in the hospital corridor, his face ashen. Hearing this, he suddenly turned his head to look at the softly speaking policeman. It seemed like he had heard something utterly unbelievable. His expression was one of shock and sorrow, and for a long time, he couldn't speak. The two policemen exchanged glances before hastily leaving. Lucas stared blankly in the direction where the police had left. Then came the endless stream of medical staff and patients passing by him. Suddenly, he began coughing violently. 5 years. Has it really been 5 years? How could it be? How could it be? So long, all these years. We've been locked in a cold war, or on the phone, hurling words of resentment and loathing at each other, as if neither of us had ever kept track of how much time had passed. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had already passed, nearly 2,000 days and nights. Lucas's expression gradually twisted in agony, covering his face, his voice strained with difficulty. "Tina, Tina, how could I have argued with you for so long? It had been so many years since he last called me that." I found it bitterly ironic, wanted to laugh, yet couldn't bring myself to. Turning my head, I gazed at the dark window at the end of the corridor. Suddenly, a dull sound rang in my ears. When I looked back, The man with a pale and hollow expression stood in the bustling hospital corridor. Suddenly, as if his body had lost all strength, he collapsed heavily to his knees. His eyes were bloodshot, and his throat emitted labored, ragged gasps. Then, abruptly, a torrent of blood gushed from his mouth, staining the pristine corridor. I was momentarily stunned. I had truly never seen a perfectly healthy person suddenly vomit blood like this. A passerby screamed in shock, then medical staff hurriedly gathered around, anxiously trying to support him. "Sir, can you still get up? Please go lie down in the ward. We need to examine you." Lucas didn't move. Blankly, helplessly, he looked at the group of people in white coats surrounding him. After a long while, he seemed to suddenly snap back to reality, with trembling hands. He grabbed a doctor's coat. "Finally, you're here. Finally, you're here. Please, save my wife." Beads of cold sweat, mixed with tears, rolled down his face. He was desperate, anxious, and pleading. He looked at the group of doctors, uttering incoherent words of plea for help. "My wife," she collapsed on the ground. "Why aren't you saving her? Please, save her quickly." He spoke, his expression panicked as he stared at the ground beside him. It seemed he was hallucinating, seeing me lying there. The doctor's expressions gradually turned strange, likely beginning to think he had gone mad. No one paid him any attention. No one went to help the person he said was lying on the ground. Lucas grew increasingly frantic and helpless, suddenly dropping to his knees before a doctor. He then reached out, fumbling to take out his wallet and shoving it into the doctor's hand. "I can pay the medical fees. We have money for the treatment. Please, I beg you, save her quickly." Many years ago, before we started arguing endlessly, for a long time, we lived in extreme hardship. At our lowest point, I collapsed from exhaustion at work and was rushed to the hospital. Lucas rushed over, but couldn't even afford the medical bills. That day when I woke up, I saw him sitting by my hospital bed, silently shedding tears. In all my many years of memories, that was the first time I saw him cry. That was when we were still in love. Now, Lucas looked around at the gathered doctors with pleading eyes. "I have money now. I have money. Please, save my wife." But it was too late, too late. In this world, no one could save me anymore. Like that long night, no one came to save me. What I heard before I died was only his words. "Then by all means, show no mercy." How ironic. Now he kneels here, so deeply, so painfully, so ridiculously, saying he wants to save me, when my remains have long been buried underground. After 5 endless years of our constant quarrels and resentment, now, all the love I once had for him has long been exhausted. How ironic, how utterly ironic. Lucas stared blankly at the ground beside him, calling out in a voice that was cautious yet frantic, "Tina, Tina, at least say one more word to me." What more is there to say? Between him and me, we've argued for 5 years, spoken 5 years of resentment. Everything that needed to be said has long been said. Back then, he misunderstood me, resented me. I've explained it over and over again. He didn't believe it. So, what more can be said? I turned my head away, unwilling to spare even one more glance. In my ears lingered my father's expressionless words as he walked out of the ward. "My Tina, she's gone, just as you wished." Lucas suddenly looked up. Finally losing the last shred of hope, shrinking back, he sobbed uncontrollably. The next morning, Harry, upon learning that my father had nearly killed someone, hurriedly came to N City with Alice. In the hospital room, Alice threw herself into my father's arms. No longer able to maintain the facade of a well-behaved little adult, she clung to my father in fear, crying bitterly with all her grievances. My father, still hooked to drip, held Alice tightly, his face already streaked with tears. There was unwillingness in his eyes, the unwillingness of failing to kill Bob, along with intense guilt and helplessness. His aged lips trembled as he repeatedly apologized. I'm sorry, it's all Grandpa's fault." Alice cried until she could no longer utter a single word, her tears soaking through the thin hospital gown. She was only 4 years old. It was impossible for her to truly not be afraid. Harry stayed in the hospital room, patiently comforting the grandfather and granddaughter for a long time, until Alice finally grew too tired and fell asleep. My father was given an drip with sedative components, and after soothing Alice to sleep, he quickly lay down and fell asleep too. Harry then briefly left the ward, standing by the window at the end of the hospital corridor, silently lighting a cigarette. I heard him sigh very softly. If something really happens, how could you rest in peace? My eyes suddenly welled up with tears. All these years, apart from my family, only he has helped me so much, always believing in me. As a cigarette was about to burn out, Lucas appeared beside him unnoticed, yet in just one night, Lucas seemed to have aged decades. He stayed at the hospital all night, sleepless through the hours. A faint stubble of blue-black beard shadowed his jaw, his eyes dark and sunken, his expression haggard and disheveled. As he approached Harry, he seemed unsteady on his feet, reaching out to brace himself against the wall, yet he still managed a strained, mocking laugh. Weren't you the one who loved her most deeply? She's dead. Aren't you going to commit suicide for love? Harry stubbed out his cigarette. He looked up at the speaker with a puzzled and disgusted expression. Even I found his words utterly baffling. During my time studying law in university, Harry and I were both students under the same professor. The professor once said that Harry and I were his two most outstanding students. Occasionally, during meals, he would invite both of us to join him. Over time, Harry and I gradually became acquainted. After graduation, we still remained friends, but that was all there was to it. Lucas should know this better than anyone. His words right now were truly unpleasant and utterly absurd. Harry obviously didn't want to engage with him and turned to go back to the ward. Lucas, however, stumbled after him and blocked his path. Stop pretending. Over 5 years ago outside the courtroom, you dared to embrace each other openly. She risked offending such powerful figures for the sake of your family's case. How touching. Harry, you didn't really think I was unaware, did you? I was momentarily stunned. Only after a long pause did I finally recall what he was referring to. I had just been married to Lucas for 2 months when I took on a divorce case. As it happened, my client was a cousin of Harry's. Before the lawsuit, Lucas had mentioned it to me once. He said divorce cases were the most tedious and likely to stir up trouble, advising me not to take them on. I found his words utterly baffling. Divorce cases always require lawyers to handle them, otherwise, this world would only see countless more unfortunate souls like my mother. For the first time, I had a disagreement with Lucas, and we were practically in a cold war until the trial began. For that lawsuit, I prepared with the utmost seriousness and thoroughness. On the day of the trial, Harry, as the judge, appeared in the courtroom with me for that lawsuit. I did my best to secure the greatest victory for my client. After it ended, the haggard-looking woman grabbed my hand in tears, expressing endless gratitude. Suddenly, I remembered many years ago, my mother once held my hand like this too, breaking down in tears as she said to me, "Tina, what on earth should Mom do to find relief?" But at that time, I was too young. My heart ached for her year after year of suffering, yet I was powerless to help, and now, I can finally begin to save countless others who are as unfortunate as she was. That day, leaving the courtroom, I suddenly missed my mother intensely, overwhelmed with sorrow. No one could save her from her suffering back then. In my emotional turmoil, I nearly fainted outside the courtroom and almost tumbled down the long steps. Harry hurried forward a few steps and frantically embraced me. I suddenly lost control of my emotions, my voice trembling with sobs. I cried for my long-deceased mother, cried because I had finally grown into the person she had once needed most. Harry's cousin followed behind us, seemingly struck by sudden realization as she sighed. I never mentioned it to Auntie either. "So lawyer Tina is the girlfriend you were going to bring home, at that time?" Harry's family was pressuring him to get married and arranged blind dates for him. He casually made up an excuse, saying, "I'll bring my girlfriend home for New Year's," to brush it off. But at this moment, I was misunderstood. As I raised my eyes, I suddenly saw Lucas standing not far away. That day, he happened to be at the courthouse for company matters. He just looked at me like that, calmly, silently. I went to the hospital, got in 4 drips of glucose, and didn't return until evening. I thought that since the lawsuit had concluded smoothly, it was time to properly explain things to Lucas about me taking on the lawsuit. It wasn't for Harry's relatives. As for why Harry hugged me, it was because I almost fell down the long staircase. But before I could even speak upon returning home, I was met with Lucas's furious accusations. He claimed I had stolen documents from his study and given them to his rival. I tried to explain, but he wouldn't believe me. Then came the intense arguments between us, leading to our separation. I never mentioned Harry again, nor did I think it necessary to bring him up, but as it turned out, he had truly misunderstood that day, carrying that misunderstanding all these years. He never once asked me about it. In the hospital corridor, Harry stood in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity. At last, he couldn't hold back and let out a somewhat desolate laugh. So, that's what you actually thought? Lucas angrily retorted, isn't it? Harry remained silent for a long time, unable to speak another word. He should only know that I'm dead. No amount of explanation would make any difference now. Lucas grinned with a twisted, malicious expression. There were actually no missing documents in my study at all. I just hate her, hate how she says she loves me, marries me, yet still has this unclear relationship with you. To help your relative with the lawsuit, she didn't hesitate to argue with me, go cold, or offend the powerful defendant. She says she loves me, but she's lying to me. When I was 10 years old, my parents got divorced. They're the same, just as hypocritical as her. They all say they love me, but none of them actually want me, or my sister. The court awarded me to my father and my sister to my mother, who then changed her surname to Wen. But in the end, Sarah and I still had no choice but to rely on each other and make our own way in life. He seemed somewhat delirious, resentfully, yet helplessly. He kept muttering, I truly never imagined it would come to this. Back then, I tried so hard to explain that I couldn't possibly have taken the documents from his study, but it turned out that the missing document had never existed in the first place. He simply believed in and resented my betrayal. That's why he deliberately disgusted me. Saying he suspected I would steal his documents, he deliberately disgusted me by not telling me that Sarah was his sister. 5 years of arguments. Turns out I never truly understood the real reason for his resentment toward me. In the end, it all comes down to the same thing. Simply put, he didn't trust me. When Harry spoke again, his eyes held nothing but coldness. If you knew her mother died from domestic violence back then, you would never think she took that divorce case over 5 years ago just because the plaintiff was my relative. Lucas's forced sneer froze on his face in an instant. For a long moment, he shook his head in a daze. Impossible. She clearly had no parents, only an adoptive father. Harry looked indifferently at the person before him, as if staring at a fool. No one is born without parents from the very beginning. Perhaps after marrying you, she had thought about telling you those things. But when you said that divorce lawsuits are unseemly, troublesome, and stir up trouble, she probably decided not to tell you about them anymore. Lucas shook his head in despair. I'm not. I just don't want her heart and eyes to be completely filled with matters concerning you. I thought she was determined to take on that lawsuit because of you. Harry's eyes turned red, and he let out a soft laugh. It doesn't matter anymore. It's all over, isn't it? Without another pause, he walked toward the hospital room. Behind him came the dull thud of a body collapsing to the ground, and the man finally broke down, wailing in despair. Until night fell, Lucas finally staggered to his feet and left the hospital. As the city lights came on, the streets flowed with traffic like water. As if he couldn't see, he walked out of the hospital and step by step moved toward the stream of cars. The sharp honk of a car horn pierced the air. A toy ball suddenly rolled to his feet. A 4 or 5-year-old boy hurriedly ran toward his feet. Then a young woman, flustered, chased after him, calling out gently yet urgently, Lucas, slow down, watch out for cars. Lucas suddenly came to an abrupt halt. Turning his head, he saw the woman pulling the little boy close, then holding him tightly with lingering fear as they moved away from the roadway. It was merely a child who happened to share his name. Yet Lucas stood there dumbly, staring for a long time, in his dazed state. He suddenly remembered again the last words Tina had said to him. All at once, he recalled, with crystal clarity, those final words. They weren't insignificant. They were a cry for help in the depths of despair. What she had said was, Lucas, save, she's calling for help, she's calling for help. Yet he treated it as a joke, with the cruelest words. He let her hear the final reply, then by all means, don't hold back. But actually, that wasn't the case. He just never thought about it. They would, on such an utterly unexpected night. His still young wife had left him so suddenly, so completely. Lucas, save, at that moment, for the first time in years, just as when they had still been deeply in love, she called him Lucas again. Was there even a little part of her that couldn't bear to leave him? Is there even a little thought of entrusting the child to him? Alice is his child. No paternity test, no one told him. Yet Lucas has never been more certain than at this moment. Alice will only ever be his child. Oh, they also have another child, a daughter who's just 4 years old. The sharp, intermittent blaring of car horns sounded once again. Lucas stood in the middle of the street, his blurred vision filled with the swaying flow of traffic, in the continuous stream of car lights flowing like water. In his dazed state, he seemed to see Tina's face again. Lucas first met Tina, actually. It wasn't the evening when Tina was pushed into the ditch. He first met Tina when he was 10 years old, still in elementary school. That year, his parents went through a divorce lawsuit. In court, he and his sister Sarah were treated like worthless, unwanted objects, pushed back and forth by their parents. In the end, he and his sister were each taken away by one parent. Sarah followed her mother. After a brief period of calm, their parents, who had always prioritized their careers, soon began to ignore them again. Lucas often went hungry and was bullied at school. One day after school, he was so hungry that he couldn't resist sneaking into the trash to scavenge for food. Tina suddenly appeared before her at that moment. She opened her backpack and handed him a piece of bread. Lucas was young back then, and though life was tough, he still had his pride. Caught in such an embarrassing situation, his face turned bright red, and he angrily knocked the bread to the ground. Tina froze for a moment, then crouched down to pick up the piece of bread. Without another word, she shoved it into Lucas's hand. She said softly, "This is all I have left. I was planning to eat it for dinner. It's still in the wrapper, not dirty. You can have it." After saying that, she turned and walked away. Lucas thought she was truly annoying, yet he couldn't help but start secretly paying attention to her. In that school where everyone mocked him, she was the only odd one who gave him bread. One afternoon, after school, he witnessed Tina's biological father slapping her several times in front of everyone outside the school gate. Only then did he gradually realize that her own life wasn't going smoothly either. Her father was abusive, her mother was sickly, and she often went hungry herself. Not long after, it seemed to save on tuition fees, Tina was transferred to a more remote school. After that, Lucas didn't see her for a long time. The next time they met was in their third year of junior high. He transferred to a new middle school, and one evening after school, he saw Tina being pushed into a ditch. How strange, it's been several years already, yet he recognized her at first glance. Instinctively, he knew it was her. Almost without thinking, he stepped forward. He hurriedly took off his coat and handed it to her, just like the bread she had silently given him many years ago. But when the coat was handed over, there was only a fleeting look of confusion in her expression, followed by hesitation and gratitude. Nothing more. She didn't remember him. It was only natural, after all these years had passed. Yet Lucas still felt embarrassed, nearly fleeing in panic. He hastily handed her the clothes before hurriedly leaving. That night, his parents started arguing violently again. He had to skip school for several days. When he returned to school, he learned that Tina had already transferred away. After that, there was no more news of her. When we met again, nearly a decade had passed. She remained just as she was at our first encounter, as if descending from the heavens to rescue him from peril. That day, she walked up to him, raised her eyes, and asked him earnestly, "Mr. Lucas, may I defend you?" He accepted her help. Yet regarding those most embarrassing past events, for many years he still didn't dare bring them up again. Countless times later, during the most difficult periods of his career, she would always gently embrace him and say, "Lucas, you still have me," yet he would believe she would betray him, all because of a single embrace outside the courtroom, without asking right from wrong. He didn't even give her a chance to explain. He always thought they had countless new years ahead, countless tomorrows. He always believed that one day, sooner or later, he could be open and honest, and have a proper talk with her. He thought, someday, he should properly tell her about their true first meeting. He should properly express the gratitude he had felt for so many years. Later, he was filled with guilt and overwhelming love for her. He should have talked to her properly, telling her he was bothered by her frequent interactions with Harry. If only, she would still be willing to be with him. "Can you please stop being so close to Harry?" But it's gone, all gone now. Countless words lost their chance to be spoken. The mother and son embracing each other gradually faded from his sight. Lucas finally, with great effort and difficulty, step by step, retreated to the side of the street. The briefly stalled traffic quickly resumed its flow. The wind swept up the early autumn leaves, rushing past him in haste. Just like that lover who had argued with him for 5 years, suddenly and forever had parted ways with him, and he couldn't even beg for death. Lucas stared blankly into the void, his eyes devoid of any remaining light. He wanted to cry, but no tears would come. He knew he would live a fate worse than death for the rest of his days. Extra story. Alice, Uncle Harry took me and rushed to the southern city overnight. I vaguely heard the police tell him over the phone that my grandfather had almost killed someone. How could that be? My grandfather has always been the kindest and most tender-hearted person, just like my mother. Oh, my mother, she hasn't come back yet. That night, she told me to call the police, but she herself lay down by the roadside and fell asleep. I called her for a long time, but she didn't move. The police aunt took me away, and I asked her to bring my mom home too. She agreed, but I never saw my mom again. Grandpa told me that mom went to a faraway place to take on a case. Sigh, she's always this busy. Then I'll just wait a little longer. Mom is working very hard. Alice needs to be good and listen. I went to the southern city with Uncle Harry and saw Grandpa lying peacefully in the hospital bed. They were lying to me after all. Grandpa would never kill anyone. Killing someone means going to prison. But Grandpa didn't go to prison, yet I was still terrified and rushed over to hug him tightly. Late at night, he suddenly asked me, "Alice, do you want to meet your dad?" I thought about it and shook my head very firmly. I have never seen my father, but I've heard others say that a child's father is the mother's husband. Many times, I've heard my mother talking on the phone with her husband. She always hides from me, but I've secretly listened in. That man is very mean and doesn't like mom at all. He always argues with mom on the phone, talking about divorce or something. I don't really understand. But anyone who doesn't like mom is a bad person, so I don't want to see him, and I don't want him to be my dad. I still found out who my father was. I saw that the man named Lucas was sick. He seemed to be very ill, having fainted several times and been rushed to the emergency room. I watched him from outside the hospital room door. His face was deathly pale as he anxiously called out to me, then frantically tried to get out of bed. I quickly turned around and ran back to Grandpa's hospital room. It's not like I went there on purpose to see him. I just happened to pass by that place. Grandpa's health gradually improved, and my kindergarten was about to start. On the day he was discharged from the hospital and ready to take me home, I was in the hospital corridor when I heard that man on the phone. He said urgently, "The call recording I have is from the night my wife was killed. It can prove that Bob wasn't completely unaware. I want to accuse him of premeditated murder." I can't quite understand what he's saying. Isn't his wife my mother? What does murdered mean? As I was about to leave, I heard his tone suddenly become agitated. Bob is dead. How is that possible? I accompanied Grandpa as we left the hospital. One evening, Grandpa and I were watching TV together. On the news, a woman was wearing prison clothes. She looked somewhat familiar to me. After thinking for a while, I finally remembered. On the night Mom disappeared, an auntie invited her to dinner, saying she wanted to thank her. I think it's the same auntie on TV. I saw Grandpa staring intently at the TV, his eyes very red. That auntie looked beyond the TV, saying things I couldn't quite understand. It's attorney Tina, who gave me a new life. She's my savior, my second mother, but now she died because of me, and I can no longer enjoy a single day of freedom with peace of mind. If it takes a life to drag Bob to pay for lawyer Tina's death, then that life should be mine, murderer. I don't care, I've been dead for a long time. The image on the TV screen shook violently. When it returned to normal, the aunt's face and voice had disappeared. It seemed as if she had been taken away. I heard Grandpa's trembling cry, "The person you saved is just like you." That night, I suddenly had a dream. I dreamed of a rising wind, and the wind carried Mom away. Mom said, "Alice, don't be sad. Mom will wait for you in a very, very distant afterlife." What is the afterlife? I don't know. But I seem to be realizing that I no longer have a mother. When I was 9 years old, my grandfather still passed away due to illness. Uncle Harry handled my grandfather's funeral arrangements and then said he would take me with him, promising to raise me from then on. That man came too. He also said he would take me away. I don't want to go with him. I want to go to Uncle Harry's place. But he told me, "Your Uncle Harry is still young. If he takes you with him, he won't be able to find his own wife or have his own children." When Mom was still alive, she often said that Uncle Harry was a great man who helped us a lot. She also said that Uncle Harry should find a kind and virtuous wife. After some thought, I still decided to leave with that man. I don't want to burden Uncle Harry's entire life. Mom said good people should be rewarded with good fortune. I don't like talking to that man. Many times, he asked me sadly, Alice, do you hate your dad? Why should I hate him? I just don't want to like him. Just as he said countless times on the phone that he didn't like Mom. When I was 13, the teacher assigned homework and posted it in the class group chat. I took that man's phone and opened the group chat to check the homework. I accidentally saw a recording in his phone. The file was named Tina, my mother's name. I couldn't resist opening it. It was a recording from the night my mother passed away. Finally, I remembered, that night, Mom wasn't just asleep by the roadside, she was brutally murdered by Bob, her face and body covered in blood. With just her words, she fought fiercely, saving countless women from suffering, yet when she died, her lips were cruelly sewn shut. At the end of the recording, I heard her voice trembling in pain, Lucas, save. Then came my biological father's cold response, then don't hesitate at all. So that night, it was like this. I moved out of the house completely. On the day I left, that man followed me out of the front yard, tears streaming down his face as he choked back sobs behind me. I wondered, what exactly was he crying about? When my mother died, he didn't shed a single tear. I used the savings left by my grandfather and mother to rent a small place to live on my own. Several aunties who had been helped by my mother came to me, insisting on taking care of my daily needs. They tearfully told me how my mother had helped them in the past. They said my mother was a truly good person. I nodded earnestly and said, yes, my mom is the best person in this world. She's a hero, following in my mother's footsteps. I walked the path she had taken. I studied law in college. And after graduating at 22, I became a divorce lawyer. In this world, there are always so many unfortunate women, Mother said. Someone must light a lamp in this world, so they can see, even the faintest glimmer of hope. Only when people see hope can they hold on until tomorrow. At the age of 25, I got married to a gentle husband, much like Uncle Harry. In late autumn, I successfully concluded a divorce case. Outside the courtroom, the plaintiff knelt before me in tears, sobbing and calling me her savior. In that instant, I suddenly remembered the woman from the TV many years ago. She said, Attorney Tina, you're like a second mother to me. The words I didn't understand back then suddenly became clear at this moment. Flustered, I helped the person before me to their feet, only to find myself suddenly shedding tears as well. My mother, how I miss her, all these years. Not a single moment has been forgotten. That night, my biological father called me again. His voice sounded exhausted and haggard, pleading with me once more, asking if I could come back for a meal. I said, I've been very busy lately, let's see in a while. After hanging up the phone, 2 days later in the afternoon, I suddenly received a call from the police, informing me of my biological father's passing. When he was found, he had already been dead for 2 days. The estimated time of death was the night he last called me. He had lived alone for many years, and it took 2 days after his death for someone to find him. At the request of the police, I rushed to H City to claim his remains. It was my first time setting foot in the apartment where he and my mother had once lived together. It was an old, cramped apartment. All these years, he had achieved great success in his career, with properties spread everywhere. Yet, when he died, he still chose this place. The interior was desolate, filled only with the gloomy shades of black, white, and gray. Lifeless, as if it were hell. The only splash of color in the house was the faded, old-fashioned wedding photo hanging on the living room wall. I looked at the young couple in the photo, embracing intimately and smiling at each other. I saw my mother's vibrant, bashful smile, one I had never seen before. It felt like a lifetime ago. A bowl of scallion oil noodles still sits on the kitchen counter. After several days, the oil floating on the broth has nearly solidified. He probably made it and left it here just before he died, likely fantasizing that my mother could eat it. Back when I still lived with him, I once heard him mumble drunkenly that my mother used to love the scallion oil noodles he made. Later, I also tasted the noodles he made, and they were really just average. It seems he never understood, even until his death, what my mother truly loved was never just that bowl of noodles, but rather the one who once loved and trusted her with all his heart. I followed the police into the bedroom and saw his body lying on the bed. He had aged beyond recognition. He was barely over 50, yet his face bore only exhaustion and desolation, his hair already nearly all white. The police pried open his tightly clenched palm. Inside was a composite photograph. In the picture, Mom held 4-year-old me, smiling at the camera. The man's headshot next to it was clearly cropped and photoshopped onto the image. He didn't even have a single photo of the three of us together, a lover who was so wronged by him in life, yet after death, she became the object of his longing and affection. I found it amusing, yet in that very moment, my eyes welled up with tears. That night he called me, asking me one last time to come home for a meal. I had actually considered going back to see him once, but I was genuinely busy at the time, and when I said, later, I truly meant it. Yet he probably thought I was just making excuses again. I left this place. A wind rose in the front courtyard of the neighborhood, scattering the withered yellow leaves across the ground. In my somewhat muddled thoughts, I suddenly remembered that dream from many, many years ago. In the dream, my mother said to me, "Alice, don't be sad. Mom will be waiting for you in the very distant afterlife." In my dazed vision, it seemed I saw again the faces of my mother and grandfather. 4-year-old Alice has grown up and finally understands what the afterlife means. May Mom and Grandpa find peace and happiness in the afterlife. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.